Almerindo Graziano es el CEO de SILENSEC, una empresa de consultoría de gestión, servicios tecnológicos y de formación especializada en servicios de seguridad de la información. Posee un máster en ingeniería electrónica y un doctorado en seguridad informática móvil, ambos de la Universidad de Nápoles, Italia. Durante 5 años fue también el fundador y líder de la maestría en sistemas de la información de seguridad de la Universidad Hallam, en cooperación con British Standard Institution. Es autor de una serie de cursos de formación de hacking ético para la detección de instrucciones. Ha sido consultor en seguridad de la formación para las organizaciones privadas y gubernamentales en Europa, África y Oriente Medio.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? It's good to be the first presentation of the morning. This presentation, just a small note, was meant to be delivered by my colleague, is the head of research for SILENSEC. Unfortunately, he had trouble coming over. He was stopped at the airport for user visa transit, so a long story. So I was supposed to do one presentation, which is today on cyber threat intelligence, but I'm also doing the one from my colleague George. Okay, I am Italian of origin, so I try to understand. I do understand a little bit of Spanish, but I will need translation for the questions and for the answers. Just a little bit about us, so that I put you in the context. We've been working. We are an organization that works only in security. Our specialization areas are compliance, security audit. We are ISO 27001. We also do log management, SIEM systems, cyber threat intelligence services, and all the logos that you see there are our training courses. In fact, in my capacity here with collaboration with the ITU, we are also organizing part of the cyber drill Thursday and Friday. And specifically, we are going to do exercises on log analysis and incident response. Okay, so what is the presentation about? We're going to talk about rats, not from the animal kingdom, but from the computer systems. By the way, just a quick note, all the cartoons, first of all, the presentation will be available, we'll share it with you. But all the cartoons and all the editorials that you see here, we actually also make available to our website. We run a daily news service. It's free, so you're welcome to have access to it. If you follow us on our LinkedIn or Facebook page, every day we post news on security. Everything that is happening around the world with regards to security news, but also to hacks or anything related to security. So you can use those cartoons and those editorials for security awareness within your organization. So I invite you to visit our LinkedIn page and subscribe to that. It's free. Okay, let's begin with the definition. We've also tried to give some statistics using our cyber threat intelligence capability to also give you some data at the end of the presentation. I'll tell you more about that. Now, a rat. Remote Access Trojans or remote administration tool is malicious software with the intent to allow access to a computer. So basically, it's a remote control system. It's basically an evolution from backdoors, but it's been evolved in the recent years to include a lot of functionalities, as I'll show you. They exhibit Trojan behavior in the sense that they disguise themselves to be what they're not. And they contain a range of algorithms to ensure access to the system that is being compromised is maintained and to maintain the persistence over time. There are a varieties of rats out there. This is just a sample of system, but I will tell you more about the ones that we have analyzed. There are quite a lot. We've actually done an analysis for this presentation for the last 6 months and looking at the most common ones and the way they are distributed. Okay, now when we're talking about rat, the most important definition is remote access, remote control. However, that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg, because once a rat has been installed, once a rat has been has compromised the system, there are payloads, there are additional functionalities that can be executed and that are installed with the rat itself. Here we actually have a number of them that we've cataloged and listed, and not every rat that you will come across will have all of these functionalities. Some of them will, some of them will not, okay? So you go from the most common one, which is the shell access, which basically gives you access to the terminal, for example, the Windows terminal. Desktop control, to control what's on the desktop. Audio video capture, file system access, key logging, that can be done in different ways. There are different techniques of doing the key logging, but key logging is one of the key functionalities of a rat. Password stealing. Key logging can be used for password stealing, but not necessarily. And then damage or system control, so the ability to shut down system. This is extremely important and extremely relevant when we are talking about rat for industrial control systems or systems where the availability of the system is very, very important, okay? So where we don't want the system to be rebooted or shut down. Now, we've done a lot of work in terms of, for our cyber threat intelligence research, to basically understand the target, the threat agents, the behavior, and so on. I'm sure you're very familiar with all the reports that say that all the attacks come from China, or all the attacks come from Russia, or all the attacks come from a certain country. Well, basically, what they usually do, they look at the IP address where the attack is originating from. However, the problem is not that simple, because you can't just look at IP addresses. So the way you establish attribution for malware is by looking at a number of things. And these are the type of characteristics that we look at. So you have the target, the behavior, and the complexity. In other words, if I want to establish who is the threat agent, who is attacking me, who is behind this malware, I can't just look at the IP address, because masking IP addresses, masking the identity and the origin of an attack is the easiest thing in the world. There are plenty of vulnerable hosts around the world. I can compromise any of those hosts, and I can launch any attack or infect any system from those IP addresses. So the origin of an IP address is not a strong indication of where the attack is coming from, who is the threat agent. So what are the three things that we look at? We look at the target, the behavior, and the complexity. So first of all, we have the behavior, okay? How is the malware infecting the target? You see, if I am looking at things like mass infection, do I have a centralized command and control system, automation of remote tasks, key logging file systems? So what is the behavior? What does the rat do? What does the malware do, okay? Complexity. You see, you can have a certain behavior, for example, the key logging, but the way the key logging is implemented can vary, okay? I can intercept API call, I can operate at the operating system level, on the application level, so kernel level, user level. There are different ways of doing it. And the complexity of the malware, the complexity of how a certain behavior is executed, can tell me a lot about the threat agent. Who has the capability to develop such a malware? Who has the resources for developing such a malware? And then obviously the target. The target also tells me about the threat agent. There are a wide range of targets. As you know, you have financial institutions, you have government, you have standard organization. And looking at who is targeted, which organization are targeted, I can also learn about the threat agent. So just looking at the IP address is not sufficient, and there's a lot of work in this area. Now, threat agent. Threat agent is the agent or the entity responsible for the attack, okay? It can be an individual, it can be a group of people, but there are a number of different actors. And to understand the threat agent, we need to understand also the malware that is generated and is used for attacking. So this is a table that we produced. We have several of these. In fact, if you come to our cyber threat intelligence presentation today, I have a similar one, but a little bit more different, which is actually focused on cyber threats rather than on the complexity of malware. In this particular case, we are looking at the different type of TA, threat agents. We start from the script kiddies up to cyber espionage. And we list the capability that they have. In other words, the resources and the technical capability, the ability they have. Then the resources that they have, so how much money they have, and then the motivation, what is driving their action, and the potential objectives, okay? Now, this table may not be extremely detailed, but having a table like this is extremely important when analyzing malware because it helps in the attribution. Just noticing a malware on an infected system and looking at the IP address or looking at, for example, the complexity is not enough. We have to have a clear map of who the threat agents may be, what the complexity of the malware is, the resources required to develop such a malware. So it's very, very important to have a clear picture of this. And for cyber espionage, for example, we have to have a lot of resources, a lot of research, in many cases because the amount of resources required and the length of the attack involved is actually quite long. So sustained level of resources. Now, how do we characterize a threat agent? So the malicious user. There are a number of properties. We have the capability, the objective, the opportunity, the motivation, and the resources. So there are obviously the objective, what is the objective of the threat agent, then what is the capability, the technical capability. There is a lot of malware that can be developed with COD system, components off the shelf. You don't need to actually be a programming wizard to develop malware for certain types. The resources required in this case, for example, will be just a few dollars or a few tens of dollars to be able to acquire the component and just do some minor modification. With regards to RAT, the common RAT that you will see, that you will experience, do not require advanced resource, advanced capability. If you come across RAT that has advanced capabilities, then obviously that tells you much more about the threat agent. The objectives of the analysis of the RAT will tell you about the objectives. So for example, if I'm looking at the functionalities, we said we have recording audio videos, we have key logging, we have the shell access, control of the desktop, remote booting. By looking at these functionalities, I can also infer the objectives of the RAT. So for example, if I find a malware which has key logging capabilities, then what is the objective? What is the potential objective? If I find a key logging RAT on a system where it doesn't have actually a lot of sensitive credentials, then maybe that malware was not really intended for that particular system because there is no really credentials that can be stolen. The opportunity, okay, this is about the context of the organization. In order to infect an organization, we have to look for vulnerabilities, for opportunities. For example, it could be lack of awareness, lack of patch systems. So understanding of the organization is extremely important. Was this malware designed to address the specific vulnerabilities of my organization, or was it designed to address, for example, a specific patch that is missing, which is common across every organization in the world? Okay, so an analysis of the vulnerability that the malware exploits also tells me about that malware, tells me about the intention. Was it developed strictly for us, or was it a generic malware? Motivation. Here we can have many motivation, but again, the analysis of the malware will give us an understanding of the possible motivation. As we will cover today also in the cyber threat intelligence, understanding the potential threat agents and the motivation, and understanding us as an organization who may want to target us, will give us a great insight into the ability to predict future attacks. We can't address every attack in the world. We have to rationalize the use of the resources that we have. There are plenty of threats out there. Which one are applicable to us? That's very important. That's the question. If you look at the most rat, the complexity is not high. The source code for most rats is available online. So it's pretty much based on reuse of existing malware and doing some customization. Therefore, the entry level, the resources required for developing rat are not extensive. Now, let's look at propagation techniques. How can they propagate? Again, by looking at the propagation, we can again understand more about the threat agent, and understanding about the threat agent help us put in place proactive measure to reduce the risk of compromise. Okay? Usually you can have the two biggest categories are manual-based and automated. Manual-based is usually involved in the exploitation of, let's say, human weaknesses. For example, lack of awareness, whereby people can pick up a USB or can click on infected email with a phishing email, and then they get infected. And then automated requires much less user intervention. Okay, so let's look at the physical one. Okay, these attacks require physical access to the organization. In other words, the attacker has to be physically involved or come into physical contact with the organization. High-risk attacks, so you have a breaking and entering. It could be someone, for example, breaching a physical boundaries of the organization and deploying compromised USB or CD, but most cases USB, or also dealing with employees that are lacking in security awareness. And then you have sorry, that's the, I was talking about the high-risk one. The medium one are instead the USB, because they are lower risk because you don't actually have to interact with the person. You can just drop the USB and then wait for someone to collect it. And statistics say, if you look at the research and the attacks and the news, even in today's age, when we know that we cannot trust USBs, the amount of compromise that start and that are carried out through malicious USB is still there. So the lack of security awareness is still a major factor. Okay. Now, what are the security controls that you can put in place for the protection against malware and against remote access system? You have quite a few. You have obviously physical system. This is for the breaking and entering. So those are the controls against sort of physical attacks. Okay, so physical access control, monitoring, CCTV. That's for that type of attacks. The most important one, the one that I would put on top of everything, is security awareness. Security awareness is the most important element of an organization security governance. And many organizations do security awareness, and from our experience, we do a lot of compliance projects. The way security awareness is done in the organization is through maybe some slides, some web-based system. But do you know what is the most common mistake that many organizations do when it comes to security awareness? They don't test. A lot of organizations do awareness just as a tick box exercise. They just do some tick box exercise to cover some basic awareness, but they never test the understanding and the effectiveness of that awareness. If you have time and desire, look into things like active testing, whereby an organization not only delivers awareness training, but also actively tests the user. I'll give you an example. I can do a security awareness on social engineering. A very effective way of testing that is by sending phishing emails, obviously in a controlled fashion, from within the organization and see how many people click. And that's for phishing attacks. You can do the same thing for USB. You can do the same thing for sharing of passwords, for access controls. It's very, very important to actually have a testing of the security awareness. And obviously, you have other controls such as employee screening and background checks. So that's for the physical part. Here we go. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Now, the most dangerous one are obviously the network-based one, because they don't require access to the organization, and it can be done remotely, okay? Typical of advanced persistent threat type of scenarios where the attack is repeated over time and consistently until the objective is achieved. Okay, so these are the network-based. How do they work? As I said, the majority of them uses systems and software that is readily available, which basically means that it exploits vulnerabilities that, pretty much are there. The most dangerous ones are the ones that use and exploit zero-day vulnerabilities. In other words, vulnerabilities that have not been yet disclosed and therefore cannot be patched. A lot has been said and it continues to be said about 0 days. It is a big market. There are researchers or gray hat people that continuously invest a lot of resources to sell 0 days, and there are companies that monetize on the non-disclosure of these vulnerabilities. I know a lot of people and a lot of security consultants who keep hold to the 0 vulnerabilities that they know. They don't disclose them to anyone. They may not be worth a lot of money. However, they are very, very useful if you want to gain access to a system. I'll give you an example. If you talk about telcos, okay? A lot of telcos and a lot of even banks run on Solaris or old legacy systems like that. Do you know how many vulnerabilities these systems have? By exploiting these vulnerabilities, these unpublished vulnerabilities, you can actually gain very quickly access to these systems, and you can eventually take control of an entire telecommunication network. And I'm not just talking about access to the system, I'm talking about access to the entire network, the ability to intercept calls, intercept SMSs. Extremely dangerous. So that's one of the attack vectors, exploiting 0 days, or Wi-Fi hacking, or mobile hacking. There is a famous attack for over-the-air configuration. You know that if you have a mobile phone, you receive the configuration for the browsing on that phone by the telecom provider. That configuration gives you the details of the proxy to use, the gateway, and things like that. Now, I can potentially send you a different message, pretending to be the telco, and giving you a different configuration, so that instead of going through the telco proxy, you go through my proxy. And therefore, every time you use your phone to read your email or to browse, instead of going through the telco, you just use the telco sort of data, but you go through my system, and I can intercept everything. Okay, so the high risk are obviously related to the 0 days. Okay, if you look at the behavior of certain rats, the more complex one will have a smart way of first identifying other vulnerable systems in the network and propagating them by either exploiting the same 0-day vulnerability or by exploiting other vulnerabilities. So they may have a database of vulnerabilities that can be looked for in the network and then exploited. Again, this can be a smart or complex way depending on the characteristic of the malware. So high risk means very efficient, very complex, able to exploit unpublished, undocumented vulnerabilities. Lower medium risk involves the exploitation of commonly known vulnerabilities. We do a lot of penetration tests. Do you know what the 3 most common vulnerabilities are for any organization? I always say there are 3 things that any organization can do. If they do these 3 things, they lower the security posture, the bar, from this to this. They're not perfect, but they raise the bar consistently. Okay, so the first one is weak passwords or very poorly managed passwords. The second one is unpatched system. The third one is badly configured system. If you address these 3 problems, you address pretty much, I won't say 80, the 80-20 rule, but I would say even more than 80% of the issues in an organization: password, patching, and configuration. Now, it's easier said than done. If you have a small organization, it's fine. If you have very large organizations with thousands of users and computers, then patching doesn't sound so easy anymore, because you have to understand, you have to prioritize, you have to understand when to patch, when not to patch. You have legacy system, same thing for configuration, and so on and so forth. But basically, it's 3 basic systems, 3 basic issues. Now, when it comes to network-based malware, there is a lot more that we can do. In fact, there's quite a lot. Okay, so we have intrusion detection systems, host-based intrusion detection systems. There are a lot of solutions out there that are coming out. Will not refer to anyone in particular, but you've seen in the last few years the evolution of endpoint security from antivirus to much more advanced endpoint security, where they run host-based intrusion detection systems. They do heuristics, they do more than just signature-based. So they are able to identify malware, even though that malware hasn't been seen that. In my experience, and we do a lot of SIM integration, various vendors, there is one feature that many organizations can use and never use. Okay, so behavioral analysis, looking at the baseline of traffic in your organization. When I ask any organization the following question, I never get an answer. Okay, I ask, for example, what is the baseline HTTP traffic that you experience? What is the baseline DNS, ICMP traffic? What is normal for your network? Is 1,000 email on a Monday morning normal or not normal? What ports are normally open? Basically, many organizations install monitoring system, but they have no idea what they're monitoring. In other words, they have no idea of what is normal for them in their organization. If you don't know what's normal, then you cannot be alerted, you cannot identify anomalies. So you have to have a very strong understanding of the organization, the baseline, in order to be able to do that. And that's what I always say. Software, hardware, systems are beautiful. I love them. Very nice and technologically advanced. But if you don't use them correctly, they are completely useless. And that's my argument always to people, and to vendors, okay? We are a consultancy company, we resell some products, but we don't make the interest of the vendor. And my question, my comment to organizations try to choose a vendor is, there is no silver bullet. Yes, one vendor may be better than another, may have more scalability, may have a better pricing, may have more features, but at the end of the day, you will still need human beings for running that system. And if you don't use that system, the more expensive the solution is, the more the waste that you will have implemented because you are not using it, okay? So you have the patching, you have auditing, but the biggest challenge and the biggest way forward for detecting and combating malware is monitoring. A lot of organizations, when we work with them, they say, oh, we have not had many incidents this year. And my first question is, how do you know? And quickly enough, you realize that they don't do a lot of monitoring. There is not a lot of incident reporting. And therefore, their false confidence about not being incidents is actually very limited. Another technique for propagation is obviously social engineering, okay? The most common ones that we are facing these days are the targeting phishing attack, the spear phishing. We do a lot of work on cyber threat intelligence, and one of the things that you notice is that one of the most common attacks that are coming out these days, or in the last few years really, is social media impersonation. Social media impersonation covers not only individuals, but also companies. We had a client last month, he called me and he said, oh, Al, I just noticed there is a Twitter account that is impersonating our bank. And basically, this user had created a Twitter account with the logo of the bank, and in actual fact, the guy was actually quite smart, because if you read the sort of the account description, it says, this is a parody of this bank. But many customers would not read that. They would just see the logo of the bank, and this guy was actually dispensing true advice. It would basically say, oh, this is the customer support number, please phone this number. But at the same time, it was creating a lot of damage, because if the internet banking system of the bank went down, on the Twitter account, the guy would say, well, what do you know? It's Monday, system go down, it's life. Obviously, that's not a corporate response, but it was hurting the bank. Now, the bank, the information security from this bank had only realized that this account was live like last month. But when we did a search, we realized that this account had been active for over 2 years. And guess how many people had been hooked into this Twitter account, and how many sort of attacks could have been carried out. Imagine I have a Twitter account or a Facebook account that impersonates your organization. I can put all sorts of malware on that. I can put all sorts of malware. I can make you believe a lot of things. And that's a very, very powerful vector for introducing malware into your organization. And this is, for example, a domain of cyber threat intelligence that not many people talk about. It's not just about the IP address, the domain names. It's about monitoring. Again, remember, monitoring. It's about monitoring, in this case, social media accounts. It's about monitoring, social media. How many social media platforms do you know? So you have LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, YouTube. You have quite a few, okay? But there are many more. And they need to be monitored, because that's one of the most common propagation methods these days for distributing malware. And it's not very easy. When it comes to social engineering and social media monitoring, there is a fabulous industry that has, in the last year, developed a lot of tools for social media monitoring and sentiment analysis. So, for example, if you are a brand and you want to know what the customers are thinking of you, or who is talking badly about you, or what is the reputation that you have a lot of those tools. But if you want to monitor things like social media impersonation, posting of malware on the social media. How many of your employees are clicking on those links? How many of your employees are using company email to register on social media? Then social media monitoring tools are useless. They were not designed for that. So again, the key point here is monitoring, and very, very important. So security awareness, security and policy, simulation. As I said, awareness is very important, but monitoring is even more important than that, okay? Propagation, okay, so this is a summary of the threat agent's objectives, what they want to achieve, and the motivation. And if you look at the sort of the resources required, usually we have a lot of resources required for physical breach, but also for target network attack, down to social engineering. The social engineering one, okay, is the least expensive. It's very simple to create a social media account. It's very simple to create a fake email, a phishing email, but the effects and the consequences are very immediate and very powerful, okay? So how do we detect them? Again, you will hear me saying this over and over. In fact, that's one of my strong foothold in terms of personal interest, the monitoring side. How do you detect them? Okay, so before the attack, the only way you can prevent them is through cyber threat intelligence. Basically, understanding who is targeting your organization. There are solutions out there, and there are possibilities these days where you can actually monitor what's happening in cyber criminal groups, in cyber criminal forums, and even understand if someone is discussing mounting an attack against your organization. So you can basically take better precautions. Okay. And during an attack, obviously the detection is down to the monitoring system, to the system that you have deployed in your organization. Many organizations, in my experience, they have two things. And I don't know about Ecuador, but it's fairly common across the world. The two most common piece of security devices that organizations have are, number one, firewall. Number two, antivirus. Okay? So 9 organizations out of 10 don't have network intrusion detection systems. They don't do net flow analysis. Remember what I was telling you about anomalies, basic behavior, baseline. If you don't have that, you can't detect that, okay? And they don't have host-based intrusion detection systems. You see, a lot of the antivirus were just doing that, antivirus. But in the last 2-3 years, they have evolved into providing also host-based detection functionalities as well. But many organizations are still just using basic antivirus, which doesn't do much. Okay, very, very important for the monitoring. So host-based intrusion, network-based intrusion detection systems. They are very, very powerful because through a network-based intrusion detection system, we can detect, for example, scanning for vulnerabilities. So remember, the propagation can be, I've infected one system and I want to see what other systems are available in the network or in the organization that have similar vulnerabilities or have other vulnerabilities that I have the payload for. Now, if I don't have a network intrusion detection system, it would be very difficult, next to impossible, to detect scans like that. Okay. Also, through network-based intrusion detection system and net flow analysis, I can also see spikes in traffic for certain protocols. For example, HTTP protocol, for DNS. Do you know that, if you think about the objective of most hacks, is about stealing information, okay? So if I call a system and I want to steal information, it's not that, I put them in a briefcase and I walk out. No, I have to exfiltrate that data. Now, there are many ways of exfiltrating data. Do you know one one method of actually stealing data, corporate information, even large files, embedding them in videos and uploading a video on YouTube. So I break into your organization, I steal a lot of data, I pile it up into a server, then I create a video, and then I upload that video onto YouTube. How many organizations are disallowing uploading of videos on YouTube? You know, you're seeing traffic to YouTube, you say, well, that's normal. It's just uploading a file. No, it's not uploading a file, it's uploading a video with your company data in it, okay? That's one way. You can do it through DNS, tunneling through DNS. You can do tunneling through HTTP. You can do a lot of ways. If you don't have network intrusion detection, if you don't have net flow analysis, if you don't have monitor of that level, you cannot monitor exfiltration of data. It's impossible, okay? Host-based intrusion detection system, on the other level, on the other hand, they are very, very powerful to understand if a system has been compromised. You see, there is layers of defense. One fails, the other one catches up. The second one fails, the third one will be caught up, okay? In the end, it will be very difficult, or we have to make it very difficult for an attacker to break through every single defense layer. And a host-based intrusion detection system is very powerful because it identifies, for example, things like creation can be used to identify creation of new users, or creation of files, reading of files, okay? Or certain calls, API calls in the operating system which are privileged, which can only be done by a certain user. There are very many features that have to be deployed, that can be offered by a host-based intrusion detection system. And we cannot, so some of them are signature-based, traditional one, okay? So, you know, if they see a virus, they run a signature, and then they quarantine the file, and so on and so forth. Then they have heuristics, they look for patterns, they look for specific code that may be running, or they may be looking for API calls, again, as I said, or they may look at behavioral analysis, okay? So I'm running this executable. What is this executable doing? Which files this executable is trying to read, to write? There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a behavioral analysis that alerts us and triggers alerts on potential malware, okay? Very, very important. Now, the last bit of the presentation is a little bit more on statistical analysis. We've done a little bit of research on the last 6 months for rats around the world, okay? So we do have access to a number of threat intelligence feeds and sources of information, some of them commercial, some of them open source. And, you know, you can look it up on when when I share the presentation, but this is the sort of the rat that they've come across our radar, and you know, quite a lot. Also a very sort of rudimentary analysis at this stage, but you know, just to give you an idea of the attack types. Okay, so some, you know, majority is for cyber espionage, and 40% is for cybercrime. This is based on the data that we have analyzed. Target organization, you have government, financial, military, and other in terms of what they are targeting. Source of attack, okay, China, Pakistan, Russia. Again, this is based on the analysis of the data that we have, but again, one important comment that I hope you take away from this presentation is there are two types of threat agents. You have the threat agent that is actually committing the crime or sort of executing the attack, and the threat agent that is sort of commissioning the attack, the one that is paying. You know, if you're talking about organized crime, you have, you know, the headhunter, and then you have the boss that is paying the headhunter to make the crime. Okay, so very, very important to distinguish between the two. And target countries, you have there, you know, Ukraine, India, Russia, Canada, Germany. And the most common attacks: malicious document, email phishing, and malicious files, email phishing. And that concludes my presentation. So just to summarize, key things to take away from this presentation. The complexity of, first of all, we described what a RAT is. We identified functionalities. Remember, a RAT, as it was a few years ago, is not the same thing as a RAT today. A RAT today can exhibit so many different functionalities. The complexity and the behavior of a RAT will tell us about the threat agent. Just because you find malware that has been found in another organization doesn't mean that you have been the target of the specific target of that malware. You may be a stepping stone to execute a crime. You may be used as a staging platform. How do we protect against malware? The key word here is, for proactive measure, you have to look at cyber threat intelligence. Not looking at product and services, I'm talking about cyber threat intelligence process, which is the process of looking outwards and asking the question, who is after me? Why should they be after me? What can I do to prevent this? And then reactive is the monitoring. We have to monitor. Remember, firewall and antivirus are very important. I'm not saying they're useless. In fact, you have to have them, but you can't rely on them for the monitoring and the detection of malware. You have to have host-based intrusion detection systems. You have to have network intrusion detection system. You have to have some sort of monitoring technology. Call it a SIEM, call it a log management system, whatever you want, but you need to be able to have visibility. And most important, you have to have processes. You have to have people. If you install, buy, acquire all these technologies, but you don't have people that use them, you don't have procedures, you don't have competence for using these technologies, it would be completely useless. I see, as a company, we participate to tenders weekly, pretty much, okay? Most of the time, when we see RFP or tenders for security sort of solutions, it's very disappointing to see that the budget allocated or the requirements for staff competence and training is almost zero. It's like companies are interested in acquiring a solution, but have no interest in training the people who are supposed to use that solution. It's like you're buying a Ferrari, but you don't even have a driving license. What's the point? Okay? And the most common comment that I get from organization is, yes, but if we train our people, they will leave us. Well, I can't remember who said that, but there is something worse than training your people and see them leave, is not training them and having them do the job that they're supposed to do. You'll be actually very surprised to experience that if you have an organization and you have, 5, 10 people in your security team, and you train all 4 of them, the likelihood of anyone leaving is actually extremely reduced. And the likelihood you actually getting value out of it is actually extremely increased. In fact, the more you invest in competence, that's my last comment for you, the more you invest in competence, the more you will save and have a return on investment on your system that you acquire. Because A, they will be better used. B, in fact, B, they will be better used. A, you will have a much more competent workforce that will help you choose the right system. At the moment, I speak to organizations and I see organizations on a daily basis. They are at the mercy of the vendors. Vendors tell them what to buy. Vendors tell them why they should buy. And it's like you go to a car dealer, you don't know anything about cars, and say, tell me which car I should buy. Okay? Instead of, having driven all your life and knowing exactly the car that you want, because you have a family, you have 2 kids, you live in the countryside, and there is a specific type of car that you need. Or you are a bachelor, single, or you are, you have loads of money, and then there's another car you want to buy. It's different.
And
That's me.